There's a lot of talk in the digital signage industry about creating a more consumer-like experience, which makes sense because we are consuming data at a phenomenal rate. We're creating data and consuming it through smartphones, tablets, computers, televisions sometimes. Most of our day is spent in some way, shape, or form interacting with devices and applications that allow us to get data. And the way that we do that is very individual. In fact, it's so individual that some people are predicting that when the technology gets there to be able to identify how someone uses said technologies, that is better than a password because no two people use it exactly the same way. So we're going to talk a little bit about why customer experience is the new buzzword. I'm here with Sean Matthews, President and CEO of Visix. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Derek. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for coming, and thank you, everybody, for listening. This is digital signage done right. Whether you're new to digital signage or a seasoned pro, this podcast gives you practical advice about systems, communications, and content to better engage your audience. I'm Derek DeWitt, Communications Specialist for Visix. Welcome to Digital Signage Done Right. Okay, so CXUX Business loves acronyms. They love to be jargony. Customer experience, user experience, same thing, different things?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. I think, when you think about digital signage technology and how it's being used, obviously there's a lot of customer experience situations, particularly in, quick serve restaurants and places where you might interact with kiosks. But
more and more all the time.
Yeah. But in the world of corporate and campus communication, it's the same thing. We're trying to create a personal customer experience or user experience because the days have evolved. And, it used to be that digital signs were designed to replace printed placards and posters and that kind of thing. But it's moved way beyond that because, quite frankly, now with displays getting larger and better and, more dynamic, the reality is that interactive displays and interactive devices they're ubiquitous. And so you have one in your pocket with you every day. And so you expect the same experience or better from a very large display in a corporate lobby.
Anywhere you go now, you see little fingerprints all over the screens because people automatically walk up and say, "Oh, can I?" No? Okay.
Yeah. In fact, there's a little bit of sense of rejection or failure if you can't interact with the display. So
disappointment.
Yeah, disappointment.
Oh, wow. These guys are so 5 years ago.
Yeah. And so what's interesting about that, though, of course, is that it does put additional burden on the content creators because now they're having to create a personal experience that person can interact with, and your interactions might be different than mine. So it's not just one part of the screen, it's multiple zones on the screen need to have interactive elements built into them. So the content creation responsibility and experience is much different, and it's more sophisticated and more elaborate.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's interesting. This has happened in rather a short period of time. I mean, I remember back in I guess it was the late 80s, I had one of the very early IBM clones, as they were known, the 386. You had your choice of green text on a black background, or if you were super fancy, amber. And that was it. And I actually saw, when I moved to Europe, I saw at a university campus the earliest form of the internet when it was all text. It was all DOS. It was all text. That was the whole thing. And then in the mid-90s, here comes the web with this different way of looking at things. Apple pioneers icons and all of this, and it just transformed them. Think about those early websites compared to, say, websites today. Compared to now, clunky, cumbersome, slow, difficult to negotiate, difficult to figure out. Some people didn't even know why they needed them. And then over time, it's changed.
Yeah, and I think when you look at, the consumer expectation of what's happened since you noted the World Wide Web shows up in the 90s, and you have this sort of 1.0 web period.
Yeah.
Right? But then, we quickly get into Apple introducing the iTunes store, and I have access to whatever type of music content that I really want to get my hands on, right? It just costs a little bit of money. But then RSS feeds came along, so now I can curate news channels and things that I'm interested in. But when you talk about the speed in terms of time, MySpace is in 2003, Facebook is 2005.
Right, and people mock MySpace now, just like they mock Napster.
Yeah. And then when you keep going further in the amount of time that we're talking about, YouTube comes along in 2006, which is now the second largest search engine in the world. And then you get Twitter about the same time. And then after all of that, the smartphone shows up. And so
Right, was it 2008, 2009, something like that? Yeah.
So if you think about that, in the past 10 years, our experience with interactivity and our ability to access, quote unquote, whatever we want, I mean, it's off the chart, right? I mean, the experience is insanely efficient. And now your expectation is the same of that 70-inch display in the student center. You want to interact with the event schedule because that's what's on screen. And your expectation is there's more to that event schedule. And I liken this with my kids when they watch Netflix all the time. In fact, mine are the kids that they don't even use cable anymore. It's just streamed.
Cable?
Yeah.
Isn't that a physical thing, Dad?
Yes.
Why would you have that? How did you walk around with a cable?
That's true. That's true. But what's even interesting about watching them interact with Netflix is, so yes, they're interacting to find what it is that they want to see. But even within whatever it is that they're viewing, if they want to learn about Scarlett Johansson, they can actually drill down into her while watching, something that she's in.
Yeah.
Right? And so to me, it's just an expectation that I can interact with that screen, and you've provided me with the content that I'm looking for in some way, shape, or form, depending on how I drill into or interact with the material that's on screen.
Yeah, it seems to me those early websites were very much like, it's not a nice visual metaphor, but it is the metaphor that comes to mind, is, leading cattle through the maze on their way to slaughter. There's one way to go, and that was just it. And then over time, it got much wider, and now people can interact. It seems like the way you want to offer information now, or data, is here's a bunch of data, as much of it as possible, all you can eat buffet. You choose what you like.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, what you're describing there, which is very different than, again, the digital sign replacing a poster.
Yeah.
It's always been this phrase in our industry that content is king. And, it's kind of a cute little thing to say about material that's on screen. But there's more to content than just putting pretty images or effective messages on screen. Now, content is comprised of data and information that I want to use and access for the purpose of making my experience here more rewarding and or fulfilling. And, it's my expectation that I'm going to interact with whatever it is that you're putting on screen.
I don't know when it's going to happen, but we're going to get to a point where everything will be a touch screen.
Yeah, I mean, and if you think about the challenges of that, on the surface, you're like, man.
Yeah, on the back end, that's a very complicated project.
Right. Because, if you take it today, things like wayfinding are becoming ubiquitous in lobbies and things like that. And of course, it's easy to look at things like donor boards and mission statements and virtual tours, that kind of stuff. But the reality is that it can be much more interactive. And that's what you're going to see is, event promotions and surveys and sign-ins and your ability to respond to social media content there at the screen. I mean, it's much more than just a static display or static communications. We're looking for creating a memorable experience that you're going to take away with you. In fact, we might even add RSS plugs in the design so that you can take that experience with you in the form of a URL.
Right.
And so you can extend that experience with your friends or somewhere else.
Right. I can foresee a future where there's something, say, on the digital sign that piques my interest for whatever, and I just tap my phone to it, and it just transfers that information over. It transfers a link or something like that, so I can just go, oh, tap,
Yep.
And then I walk away with it. Oh, that's kind of cool. That's interesting.
Recently, I was with a client at a church in Houston, and they had this video wall that was comprised of like 10 screens, and there were 2 little children in the lobby of this facility. And the customer had already said that they were experiencing some problems with some of the interactive displays, and they said that people were touching them with like multiple fingers, right? And these were multi-touch displays, but it wasn't until we got there and
Not 40 fingers.
Right.
Yeah.
And we observed little kids literally slapping the displays with their hands, to try to interact with these because they thought there was going to be some experience. And there was. Obviously, it wasn't designed for children.
It was just an error code.
Yes. And so you can imagine 2 little kids saying they're just slapping these displays and running from display to display. And, it was an eye-opening experience for me because to see 2 kids, maybe 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, they've never known a different world.
That's correct.
Yeah, they're like, of course you can interact with it.
Yep.
And then, 20 years from now, they'll say, of course it's a hologram.
Yeah. And, for us, we're talking now about touchscreen interactive displays, but, we're already moving forward to the next generation of that experience, which is simply talking to the display. The same way you talk to Alexa or Siri or whatever, you're going to see the same thing from companies like Visix and others. We were the first to show that technology at a trade event not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we're going to extend that from a development perspective so that you can just drop in our widgets and add voice commands to those widgets so that if you want the weather, when someone talks to the weather or asks what's the weather going to be like, you can set parameters for it, providing 3-day forecast, 4-day forecast, or whatever. So the entire experience of interacting with the display is going to move beyond just physical interaction, but also just audible interaction to get
so some of walk up to the sign and say, "Hey, dude, show me the weather."
Yep.
And it does.
And it will do that. So that's the next stage in this sort of interactive experience. And we're excited.
Cleaner. It's cleaner than a physical touchscreen.
Well, you can imagine hospitals are obviously those that are asking for this type of technology, right?
Sure. Voice user interfaces, VUIs, that's the next step. What's going to come after that? I mean, everybody keeps thinking Minority Report, where it scans your retina and says, "Hi, Sean Matthews. Would you like to buy another pair of shoes? They're having a sale."
Well, what's interesting about technology is that often we see people, pioneer certain technologies and let's say augmented reality with digital signage, for example.
Which people are trying, yeah.
Yeah, but we demonstrated augmented reality 5 years ago and it never took off. And so when you also think about using interactions in the air, and not even
having gesture interfaces.
Yes, and so when you think about that, that technology's been around for a while. And lots of guys have experimented with it, and it just hasn't taken off. And so I'm always reluctant to say, what does the future hold? Because some of these things have already been disclosed, but yet have already been, rejected. If you think about Google Glass.
Yeah. What happened with that? Yeah. I can't remember their name. Brick or something. I can't remember what they were called. But that interface that was used in the movie Minority Report, where they're just gesturing in a kind of a 3D projected into the air computer interface, that was actually a real company. They weren't that far along, but they were getting there. And that was quite a number of years ago. And that company is still languishing. And I think that that's because they're getting leapfrogged. The change of pace is so fast in technology now that someone comes up with a great idea, and then before they can really develop it and convince the public that that's the way to go, the next smart kids on the block have already found a way to overtake them and do everything it can do plus more.
Yep. That's the challenge of being in the technology business, right? And maintaining a business life cycle in that competitive environment is always a challenge. And so that's why every day, we're having to look at other ways to interact with these displays.
Never a dull moment. Yeah, that's right. I think a lot of companies might get, because of this, oh gosh, what if I go for a voice user interface and a year from now something better comes along? Am I going to be stuck in the past? Am I going to be in this? But I think that it behooves companies, especially larger companies with, say, an enterprise-wide deployment, to think of more long-term than they're maybe accustomed to, much longer than a quarter or maybe even a fiscal year, and think about how that innovative tech will, in fact, save you money over time.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously an important fact. Everybody talks about future-proofing technologies and those types of things, but it is obviously something that it's just a function of technology, and that's technological obsolescence. It just happens. Yeah. And I am reluctant to tell anybody that we will have all of the answers forever, but we certainly have built a platform that, with using best-of-breed type practices like widgets and apps and other things that we can drop into the platform using out-of-band development, helps us stay more current and provides us with the ability to update the technology more efficiently than we might if we were locked into some legacy architecture.
Today, environmental concerns are very much in the news and on people's minds. And obviously, you're no longer printing posters and things like this. And there are all of those things. You have to recycle them, or they end up in a landfill. They release methane and a bunch of stuff. The ink is toxic and so on. Yet the argument can also be made, yes, but these things are using electricity, obviously. Are they more environmentally friendly? I think in the modern age, we can say certainly.
Unfortunately, that's a part of technology, and to build technology, it does have an environmental impact, period, right? I mean, and, everything that's plastic has some petroleum-based, element to it. Your laptops, these displays, computers all have, mercury and other things in them that, are global contaminants. But when compared compared to those other legacy technologies, printing and other things, this is far less damaging. In fact, even if you think about a plasma display 15 years ago compared to a OLED display today, the energy consumption and the amount of energy consumed to produce them is a fraction of what it used to be. And so,
and to use them is, it's way tenth. It's way down. Yeah.
So it's not a perfectly clean world to build technology, but I think the cost to maintain it is less than some of those other technologies that were around for hundreds of years in printing and
One of the things we talk about today is cars, and cars are so dirty and this and this. And yes, they are. There's no doubt about them. They throw a lot of carbon into the air. And yet, think about what they replaced. They replaced horses. And horses and what they produce after they're done eating, let's just be honest there, was actually, in cities at least, far more polluting, caused disease, shortened people's lives, all of this. So in fact, the car, when it came around, even though it comes with its own attendant problems, was in fact the cleaner solution. Than, say, horses.
And I would say the same to this technology as well. It fits the same pattern of technological evolution.
And I think the millennials, especially, and the Gen Zers are so focused on this that it's pushing tech companies, especially hardware companies, to innovate and make things even greener and even cleaner and cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And what we need is cold fusion. And would somebody please just invent it, and then this would be finished?
That's next on the list.
That's next on the list, yeah. It's a technology-driven business, but it's used really for communications, and I know something you're fond of saying, to affect human behavior. It seems to me that really the immediate future of the digital signage industry is an attitudinal shift more than anything else. There's so much available in some of these CMSs for digital signage that a lot of companies just aren't using because they can't conceive of, they're still thinking like posters and bulletin boards and things like this, and they're not using the technology to its fullest potential.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the reality of this space. A lot of clients are still buying this technology based on the premise that they're replacing printed signs, right? Unfortunately, they've not moved beyond that basic philosophy and embraced what the technology can really do in terms of helping them communicate better and delivering their message in a more effective way, and or creating an experience that the user will find much more memorable and take with them. So, I think that's just a reality of technology and us and others having to do a better job of onboarding clients so that they fully understand what they can get out of this technology to help them, achieve their overall business or institutional objectives. Interactive displays are ubiquitous. You carry them with you everywhere, and it's going to be your expectation that whenever you see an electronic sign or electronic device, your expectation is that you can interact.
Right, and it just makes sense for something like digital signage to just say, okay, we'll do it too. If that's what you want, then by gosh, give the people what they want. This is clearly what they want.
That is correct.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you, Sean, for talking to me today.
Thank you, Derek.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Hey, want more free stuff? Then head to the resources section of Visix.com for free masterclass guides, blogs, videos, and more to help you with your digital signs. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review of this episode, and connect with us on social media.